I had the privilege of talking with their assistant O-line coach extensively about how they constructed the O-line there. And one of the things he mentioned to me was just, we knew Drew was short. We knew we had to keep pocket depth, and we knew we had to create width in the pocket so we could create throwing windows for him. And he and Drew had to work and cultivate a skill set to kind of see through those opportunities. And I think you look at Russell Wilson when he was in Seattle, he could not see very well from the pocket, so a lot of it is vacating off schedule to kind of compensate for that lack of ability to see from the pocket. So I do think that you're dealing with some very big offensive linemen. All the offensive linemen here, I think, are over 6'4", 6'5", and Sam's not a very tall guy. So I'd imagine it becomes challenging to see. I think couple that also with the fact you don't have, super big kind of physically imposing receivers. I played with Rex Grossman, who's not a very tall guy, and he would say, I really enjoy throwing to, player X, but he'd say tight end specifically. And I was like, why? He's like, because I can see you over the offensive line really well. And I thought that's something interesting that's probably underrated here. It's like, get this offensive line that hasn't been built necessarily to support a quarterback, a shorter quarterback, You've got skill position guys who are very talented, but are not very physically imposing, and you can't see them very well behind the offensive line. So I think it's probably both those things together. But I do think it's not something that is a fatal flaw. It can be remedied. But again, to your point, you'd have to ask Sam specifically, but I would imagine that it's something that affects his ability to play the position at a high level.
All right, after 15 games of Sam, and there's a chance that we won't see any more Sam this year, how would you have done it differently now that we've seen what he's good at, what he's still developing with, what he may have as, an ongoing flaw with little variance to it? What kind of offense would you have designed from the jump for him?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think, because there are some things that EB did that I really, really liked. Some concepts that he had in, some play designs that he had in that I think really spoke to what Sam does well. But I think I probably would have just taken a more conservative approach. I'm a more conservative person when it comes to offensive football and quarterback development. I just think there's a longer track record of that being successful. Kind of your Flaccos in Baltimore, your Big Bens in Pittsburgh, your early career Russell Wilson stuff, your early career Brock Purdy stuff. Like, those guys were supported by good defense, which again was something that was kind of touted at the beginning of the season, a strong running game, and there's other ways to get to the running game. But I look at Seattle, I think is a really good example, and they are very creative about how they get to the running game. They're creative about how they scheme that stuff up, and it helps insulate Drew Lock, it helps insulate Geno Smith. And when I mean insulate, I'm not saying that they don't have to play quarterback. I'm just saying instead of 50 dropbacks a game, if we can get that number to 30 or 25, that's better for the quarterback. It's less down-to-down processing for them, and it alleviates some of the pressure that they need to be perfect all the time. And I think that's kind of what I would have leaned into a little bit more. But again, that's my background. Coming from the Kyle Shanahan West Coast offense, like, that's one of the tenets is deleverage the quarterback, deleverage the offensive line, find ways to run the football and steal yards and be super efficient on first and second down, so you're not in these high leverage 3rd and 10, 3rd and long situations. So that's what I would have done. I'm sure there's a million ways to do it, but I think I would have leaned in that direction. And I think the question that I would pose, is that a viable offensive solution given how ineffective the defense was for the majority of the year? And I would say probably not. So I do think if they wanted to win games, they needed to be aggressive offensively, and that's what they did. And I think it was beneficial for Sam's development in some ways, but I think we also are seeing some of the negative results of that later in the year.
Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable to say you're not tossing Sam to the side here, even if you, for me, I'm ready to really look, I hope they are, seriously with this very unique position as a top 3 draft slot holder at a draft that has some very high ceiling quarterbacks in it, because there's that saying, if you're unsure about the quarterback that you have, then you probably don't have one. And I think at the very least you're unsure, but at the same time, it's not what the situation was last year, all due respect to Taylor Heineke. He's got real NFL arm strength. As you said, he can make every throw. He is a gamer. He's competitive. He's very good off schedule. The eyes don't come off down the field, and he's still able to run it if that's the solution. And part of me thinks that if he had been in a Shanahan-style system, which, you know, is predicated on running the football and then seeing some of the QB keepers bootlegs off of it and play action, that he could do that. Now, you still, on 3rd and 9, have to stand back in the pocket and make throws if you're going to be a good offense, ultimately. But I don't know. That's the one thing. We saw a lot of quick game. We saw the adjustment to quick game, and it was the right adjustment for him because the pure drop back stuff just was a problem for him much of the year, and it was a problem for the offensive line to a certain extent, although they are 14th in the league in Next Gen's pass block win rate rankings this week. But what we never saw was, let's try to run the football and then marry our passing game to being able to run the football. And what's interesting about that, too, Logan, is I think some of their best players on the team were their running backs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is interesting. I think it's just, and again, like, there were some really cool, like, there was a concept that they ran in last week's game that I thought was brilliant. And I think the other thing that in this whole quarterback evaluation process that is, I think, overlooked is kind of the lack of efficiency from the receivers. And what I mean by that, I was talking on the Command Center show today about how they haven't created a ton of separation, you know, and do they really understand the point of this concept? It's a new offense for them too. And so I think there's opportunities, like when you're watching, because I'm prepping San Fran, so I'm watching a lot of them, like they find ways to get guys open, definitively open, and Brock makes those throws. And I understand that is, you know, like, I understand kind of more reticently how they do that because I was part of that offense. But here, I just feel like there's opportunities where guys, you know, there's no air in the concept. Like, Sam has to make an excellent throw every single play. And when you're watching San Fran's, like, explosive play cut-up, it's like there's that excellent throw every third play. But two of the three are kind of like layups. You know, it's a screen, it's a play-action pass, it's, you know, a 50-50 ball to a receiver, and the guy makes them right. And so I think that's something that, again, is kind of lost here, is like, have you maximize what the skill position players are doing to help maximize Sam? And that becomes really challenging as well in the evaluation of where he's at, because it's kind of like we haven't seen the production from that group that we thought we were going to see in training camp. So,
you know, as you were describing that, you know, as football fans over the years, there have been, you know, offenses that you watch and they're like, my God, people are just always wide open. Like, I have to say that Norv Turner, for years, while not a great head coach, when you watched his offenses, people were just, for whatever reason, they were open. You know, same thing with the Shanahan scheme. I still find it amazing how often Travis Kelce is wide open, although in recent weeks, not so much. But with the 49ers specifically, just as a follow-up to them, how much of it is scheme versus, well, it's Kittle, it's Ayuk, it's Debo, it's McCaffrey, you know, even their backups, you know, are, you know, Jennings and the kid from Clemson, Ray McLeod. I mean, like, they just are able to get incredible separation. So how much, with the 49ers specifically, is it scheme over outrageous talent?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that was surprising when I was watching that setup.